HT. So in today's session, in the last 15 minutes, that is, so from 9:30 to almost all 11:30, 11:45, I'll talk about polity, that is the regular class, and the last half an hour, that is, I will discuss about answer writing, because the answers that I have seen, that is the answer that you wrote in the last exam, it was not that convincing, right? So that means I felt that you don't know the art of answer writing. So what is required to be written, how to understand a question, right, and what kind of information is required. So you should know all these things, because after seeing your answers, now I came to a conclusion that I need to give some hints on answer writing. That is, in the last half an hour, I'll spare time, I'll spend on this answer writing, right? So this is what the today's class. So first it will be polity, followed by the answer writing sessions, right? So in the previous class, we have discussed some of the salient features of Indian Constitution, right? So that is, we have discussed, right, the features like parliamentary system of government, quasi-federal system, rigid and flexible constitution. Then we have talked about what you call rule of law, the different elements of rule of law, right? So all these we have covered in the previous class. In today's class, let me talk about, right, some more outstanding features or salient features of Indian Constitution, alright. So let me start the class with the nature of judiciary. So our framers of Constitution, alright, the Indian Constitution has provided, alright, Indian Constitution has provided an independent judiciary. If you take nature of judiciary, it is independent judiciary. So wherever there is written constitution, wherever there are written constitutions, there we will see this independent judiciary, because it is this independent judiciary that acts as a watchdog and guardian of the constitution. So there should be someone to protect the constitution, right? So wherever there are written constitutions, there should be someone to protect this constitution, and here it is the judiciary which is given the responsibility. It is judiciary that is given the responsibility of protecting the constitution. So wherever we have written constitutions, there we see judiciary acting as watchdog, right, acting as watchdog or guardian of constitution, alright. It is guardian of constitution. So this is the role of independent judiciary. So independent judiciary is one of the outstanding feature of Indian Constitution. Now we are saying it as independent judiciary. So from whom it is independent? From whom it is independent? So it is independent from the influence of. So whenever we talk about independent judiciary, it is independent from the influence of both legislature and executive, right? It is independent from the influence of legislature and executive, alright. So in its working, judiciary is uninfluenced. In its working, judiciary is uninfluenced by either legislature or executive. That is, there is a total separation of judiciary from both legislature and executive. So in Indian Constitution, we see the working of separation of powers. In Indian Constitution, we see the working of separation of powers. A very, very important doctrine, separation of powers, a doctrine that was given by Montesquieu. All right, a doctrine that is given by Montesquieu. All right, so first of all, let me give the meaning of separation of powers. Separation of powers is about separating the legislative, executive and judicial powers of the nation. Alright, so it is separation of judicial, legislative and executive powers. It is separation of legislative, executive and judicial powers. Alright, so in a parliamentary system, normally in a parliamentary system, we don't see clear separation of legislature and executive. In a parliamentary system of government, so wherever there are parliamentary system of governments, in such a system, we don't see a clear separation of legislature and executive because right, in the previous class we have seen one element of what you call a parliamentary system, or one feature of parliamentary system of government, that is dual membership. That is dual membership. Dual membership means what? Common membership to both executive as well as legislature. That means the members of executive are also the members of legislature. The members of executive are also the members of legislature. Alright, that means there is no clear separation. There is no clear separation between executive and legislature. So make this point very clear. In a parliamentary system, wherever there are parliamentary system, we don't see clear separation between executive and legislature. Right? So what is separated is judiciary from both legislature and executive. So in a parliamentary system of government, we see separation of judiciary from legislature and executive. Alright. So whenever we talk about independent judiciary, it means judiciary that is independent from the influence of legislature and executive. Alright. So here we need to remember one point. If we take appointment and removal of judiciary, if we take appointment and removal of judiciary, right? So appointment and removal are made by executive and legislature. If you take appointments are made by executive, whereas removal is made by legislature. Alright. So both executive and legislature are involved in appointment and removal of judiciary. But still, alright, the judiciary is uninfluenced. Alright. Still, judiciary is independent, though it is appointed and removed by executive and legislature respectively, but still it is independent in its functioning. So in the functioning of judiciary, judiciary is independent. Alright. So this is one of the outstanding feature of Indian Constitution. Alright. So it is only this independent judiciary which can review the acts of both legislature and executive. Just now I said that judiciary is the guardian and watchdog of Constitution. Ante kada intamanది చెప్పినా. So ekkadaithe written constitutions untayo, wherever there are written constitutions, we see judiciary acting as watchdog and guardian. So it can fulfill the roles of watchdog and guardian. Right? Judiciary can fulfill the roles of watchdog and guardian only when it has the power to review. Only when judiciary has the power to review. Only when it has the power to review the acts of both legislature and executive. Only when it has the power to review both acts of executive as well as acts of legislature. right? So without this judicial review, or without having the power to review, can judiciary act as a guardian and watchdog of constitution? No, it cannot act, right? Ante kada, a review power lekunda, without having this review power, it is not possible for the judiciary to act as a guardian. So to fulfill the role of a guardian, to fulfill the role of what you call watchdog, it should have the power of review, right? So judicial review is another outstanding feature of Indian constitution. Judicial review is another outstanding feature of Indian constitution. Remember, right, another important point, though we say judicial review as outstanding feature of Indian constitution, this concept of judicial review is not mentioned in the constitution. We don't have explicit mention of the word judicial review. So this word judicial review is not explicitly mentioned. It is not explicitly mentioned. That means we don't have a direct mention of the word judicial review, right? It is derived, it is taken from Article 13 of the Constitution. So this concept of judicial review, it is implied in Article 13. So what is Article 13? How judicial review is mentioned in that, we will discuss later. But as of now, remember that the concept of judicial review, it is implied meaning of Article 13. Alright, and basically this concept of independent judiciary, judicial review, all they are taken from American Constitution. That is, it is taken from US Constitution. So US Constitution is a source of inspiration, right? It is a source for Indian judiciary. That is, we followed American president. In adopting the judiciary, right? So Indian judiciary is modeled on American judiciary, right? Remember this point. So we have took parliamentary system from Britain, quasi-federal system from Canada, right? Judiciary from America, right? So independent judiciary and judicial review. So these are outstanding features of Indian constitution, right? So once again I am repeating, it is this Article 13, which is the basis for judicial review. So the word judicial review is implied from Article 13, alright? So coming to another features of Indian judiciary is, our framers have provided an integrated and impartial judiciary. So the framers of Indian constitution has provided integrated and impartial judiciary. Alright, if you take this integrated and impartial judiciary, alright, so first let me explain the meaning of integrated judiciary. Integrated judiciary means a judiciary which is hierarchically organized. Hierarchy, right? So a judiciary that is hierarchically organized. Now most of you don't know the meaning of this hierarchy. Hierarchy means, right, a system of courts which are organized in a linear form, in a chain form. Linear organization, or right, organized in a chain form. That is, from top to bottom, right, all the system of courts, they are integrated with each other, right? They are chained from top court to the lowest court. So what is the highest court in India? So if you take the top court in India, it is Supreme Court. Supreme Court is at the top, So we call Supreme Court always as the apex court. Apex means the highest court, right? It is Supreme Court. And at the lowest level, what do we have? It is the Gram Nyayalays. At the lowest level, it is Gram Nyayalays, alright? Alright? In 2013, the government of India has passed Gram Nyayalay Act. The Gram Nyayalay Act was passed in 2013, providing both civil and criminal jurisdiction to the Gram Nyayalays. Alright? So that means from top to bottom. In between these, we have high courts, we have district courts, and we have other subordinate courts. Right? So all these courts are integrated with each other. They are organized in a chain format, in a linear format. So we call this as hierarchical organization. We call this as hierarchical organization. Okay. The courts in India are hierarchically organized. Alright. So we call this as integrated judiciary. Alright. So for your information, opposite to this integrated judiciary is separate judiciary. Alright. Right. It is for your information. Alright. It is the opposite of integrated judiciary is separate judiciary. The opposite of integrated judiciary is separate judiciary. That means in separate judiciary, alright, we don't see, that is every political unit having their own system of courts. That is every state having their own Supreme Court. Right? If you go to America, in American system, America follows this separate judiciary where there is a chain of courts in every state. Every state has their own chain of courts. Right? Whereas in India, do we have chain of courts in all the states? No. That is for both center and states. We have a common judiciary. India has a common judiciary for both center and states. Whereas in America, it is separate judiciary. Every state having their own system of courts. Alright. So it is just for information. Alright. So the opposite of this integrated judiciary is separate judiciary. Alright. And coming to impartial. What do you mean by impartial? It is unbiased judiciary. Impartial means it is unbiased judiciary. It is unbiased judiciary. Alright? A judiciary that will not show any kind of bias. That is a judiciary that doesn't show any kind of favoritism. So non-existence of any favoritism, non-existence of biasness. No biasness, alright? So no favoritism. No favoritism, alright? So another hallmark of Indian judiciary is unbiased judiciary. That is a judiciary that is not influenced by anyone, a judiciary that does not favor anyone. So it doesn't favor government, it doesn't favor any ordinary people or anyone. So it only goes by the principle of natural justice. It only goes by the principle of law of constitution. Right? So if at all, if judiciary shows any kind of favoritism, to whom it favors? It is to the constitution and laws of constitution. Right? So favoritism is towards constitution. Right? So this is what the nature of Indian judiciary. Right? So we have independent judiciary, we have judicial review, we have integrated judiciary and impartial judiciary. That is unbiased judiciary. I am clear about this. I am clear about Indian judiciary. So these are see, alright, they are below this. So at the Gram Panchayat level, right, these what we call Gram Nyayalayas are created, right? And here another the important feature of this Gram Nyayalaya is earlier they used to have only civil jurisdiction, but now they are being given with criminal powers. That is, even criminal cases can also be tried in Gram Nyayalayas according to the Gram Nyayalaya Act. Alright. So this is what about Indian judiciary. Right. Next, going to another important features or outstanding features. Alright. So our constitution has provided, right, fundamental rights to its citizens. Alright. So one of the outstanding feature of Indian Constitution. One of the outstanding feature of Indian Constitution is, right, providing of fundamental rights. Providing of fundamental rights, right? So they are mentioned in Part 3 of Indian Constitution, right? So these fundamental rights are mentioned in Part 3 of Indian Constitution, and we have adopted these fundamental rights by following US Constitution. So US Constitution is the source of inspiration for providing these fundamental rights. So they are called as fundamental. Why they are called as fundamental? They are basic rights, right? So fundamental here means the most important basic rights of individuals, right? So they are basic rights of individuals. They are basic rights of individual. So basic means what? The most important and essential rights for the well-being of individuals. Those rights, so those rights which are essential, for the well-being of individual. That means without these basic rights, it is not possible for the individuals to lead a healthy life, right? Healthy and good life, healthy and happy life, right? So always, if you take human beings, God has created human beings, right, with all the freedoms required, with all the liberty that is required to have and lead a healthy and a happy life. When we are created by God, we are not created, we are not restricted, right? Same as other animals, even we are created, we are born free. That is, liberties and freedoms are the birth of individuals, right? So it is not given by anyone, it is not gifted by anyone, it is given by whom? The creator of the human being, that is the God. So no one has the power to restrict them. That is the reason why even our constitution protects these basic freedoms and liberties which are essential, right? So fundamental rights talks about the basic freedoms and liberties which are essential for the individuals to lead a healthy and happy life. Alright, so they aim at promoting healthy and happy life. So these fundamental rights promote it. They aim at promoting individual good. They aim at promoting individual good, that is happiness of individuals. Alright. So, alright, another hallmark of these fundamental rights is our constitutional framers, the framers of Indian Constitution, not only provided these fundamental rights, but there are adequate safeguards given against the violation of fundamental rights. So there are safeguards available. Alright, there are safeguards available, alright, against any violation of fundamental rights, alright, so which we call them as guarantees. So these fundamental rights are guaranteed. So not only fundamental rights are given, not only fundamental rights are given, but these fundamental rights, they are guaranteed by the Constitution. So providing of fundamental rights, at the same time providing guarantee to these fundamental rights, both are given in the Constitution itself. That means there cannot be arbitrary restrictions, there cannot be arbitrary violation of fundamental rights. So no arbitrary violation is allowed. No arbitrary restrictions are allowed against fundamental rights. Alright? So they are guaranteed against this arbitrary violation. Remember, very clearly I am specifying that these guarantees are against what? These guarantees are against arbitrary violation or unlawful violation. It is against unlawful violation of fundamental rights. And these guarantees, they are in the form of constitutional writs. So these guarantees, they are in the form of constitutional writs, which are mentioned in both Article 32 as well as Article 226 of the Constitution. Right? These guarantees, they are mentioned both in Article 32 as well as Article 226 of the Constitution. Alright? Article 32 and Article 226 of the Constitution. Alright? So this is another element. Alright? Am I clear till now? Alright? So we are being given with fundamental rights. These fundamental rights are guaranteed, they are safeguarded, and this guarantee, it is a form of constitutional writs which are mentioned in Article 32 and Article 226. Alright? So this is one side of the story. Right? This is one side of fundamental rights. Going to the other side of fundamental rights. Right? Going to the other side of fundamental rights. Alright? In case of misuse, right, in case of misuse of fundamental rights, right, they should be restricted. So there is an every chance of use and misuse of fundamental rights by citizens, right. So there is an every chance of use and misuse of fundamental rights by citizens. But in the case of misuse, who should restrict them? Who should be given this power to impose restrictions? Should they be restricted or not in case of misuse? Yes, right. So they can be restricted. That means our fundamental rights, the fundamental rights that are given in the Constitution, they are restrictable. They are restrictable. Now, who enjoys the power to impose restrictions? Who enjoys the power to impose restrictions? The power to impose restrictions is given to the state. So primarily by it is executive, and every act of executive should be according to legislature. So it is the state that has the power to impose restrictions. See, primarily it is government. Government can impose restrictions, right? But government should act according to the law. Without law, can there be restrictions? Right? Without law, no restrictions can be imposed. So there should be a law. Who will make the law? It is the parliament or legislature. So it is the legislature that makes the law. So it is the parliament that makes the law. Right? So government has every power to impose restrictions. Government has every power to impose restrictions, and every restriction that is imposed by the government, should be according to law of legislature. Should be according to law of legislature. So without a law of legislature, no restriction can be imposed. Alright? Am I clear? Right? Now think that government has imposed the restrictions. Government has imposed restrictions without law. Then what such restrictions will be called as? What is the term that is used to refer such restrictions? restrictions without a law. ప్రతిదీ కూడా చట్ట ప్రకారమే చేయాలని చెప్తున్నాము. ఒకవేళ లా లేకుండా గవర్నమెంట్ రిస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ ఇంపోజ్ చేసింది అనుకోండి, రైట్, ఇన్ సచ్ కేస్ వాట్ సచ్ రిస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ విల్ బి కాల్డ్ యాజ్ arbitrary. It means arbitrary restriction. What do you mean by arbitrariness? Acting without a law, or so that is what misuse of law, right, violating the law. So every restriction that is imposed should be according to law of legislature. Another important point that is very important to know is the restriction should be reasonable in nature. Every restriction that is imposed should be reasonable. Every restriction that is imposed should be reasonable in nature. Remember, the concept of reasonability, the test of reasonability was given by Supreme Court for the first time in A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras case. Right? The test of reasonability. The test of reasonability for the first time it was given by Supreme Court in A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras case. It was in this A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras case, Supreme Court for the first time has brought this concept of reasonability and test of reasonability. Again, we will discuss this issue when we go to the chapter of fundamental rights. Right? When we go to the chapter of fundamental rights, I will have in-depth discussion. Of this word reasonability or test of reasonability. All right. So this is one thing. That means government has every power to impose restrictions on the rights of individuals, and the restrictions that are imposed should be reasonable in nature. Now who will check whether the restrictions imposed are reasonable or not? Who has the power to check whether the restrictions imposed are reasonable or not? Who will check? So by using a law of parliament, government will impose restrictions. Whether the restrictions imposed are reasonable or not, who will say, who will examine? Just think. ఒక్కసారి ఆలోచించి చెప్పండి. Who acts as guardian? Judiciary, Supreme Court, right? So whether the restrictions are reasonable or not, right, who will check this? It is judiciary, it is Supreme Court. Through the power of judicial review, by using the power of judicial review, Supreme Court will check whether this restrictions imposed are reasonable or not. Right? So this is what test of reasonability is. Alright. So now, can we say that fundamental rights are unrestricted? No, they can be restricted. Right? So we cannot say that fundamental rights are unrestricted. They are restrictable. So that is, in a simple way, alright, fundamental rights are not absolute. They are not absolute. That is, they can be restricted. Now, who has the power to impose restrictions? Who can impose restrictions on the fundamental rights of individuals? The state. State has every power to impose reasonable restrictions on the fundamental rights, right? So this fundamental rights, and all these are features of fundamental rights. So this is one of the outstanding feature of Indian Constitution. That means our framers of Constitution have clearly balanced, right, the individual freedom and liberty with the power of state, right? So on one hand, freedoms and liberties freedoms and liberty of individual, freedom and liberty of individual. On the other hand, it is the power of the state, power of the state, the power of the government. Ordinarily, the freedoms and liberty of the individuals are given importance. The rights of individuals are given importance. But in case of misuse, it is the power of the state. Another important point that we should know is these fundamental rights can be restricted during national emergency. Right? So whenever a national emergency is imposed under Article 352, coming to 12th point, whenever a national emergency is imposed, whenever a national emergency under Article 352 is imposed, alright, in such conditions, alright, fundamental rights can be restricted. Fundamental rights can be restricted according to Article 358 as well as Article 359. According to Article 358 and 359, fundamental rights can be restricted when national emergency is imposed, right? So Article 352 deals with national emergency. Article 358 and 359 deals with imposition of restrictions on fundamental rights. So I will discuss them in detail again when we go to the topic of fundamental rights. But as of now, remember that these fundamental rights can be restricted. Alright, so there is a clear balance established. There is a clear balance maintained between freedoms and liberties of individual with respect to with that of powers of the state. Right? So this is what about what you call fundamental rights. Am I clear on this point? Alright, let me have some water. So this is about fundamental rights. Remember, wherever there are fundamental rights, alright, along with fundamental rights, duties are also imposed on the individuals. So make this point very clear. No constitution provides rights without duties. No constitution provides rights without duties. So wherever there are rights, along with the rights, duties are also imposed. Along with the rights, duties are also imposed on the individuals. Duties are also imposed on individuals, right? Similarly, even our constitution, right, in part 3 itself, right, don't think that, so most of us have an extra talent. చాలా మందికి ఎక్స్ట్రా టాలెంట్ ఉంటుంది. డ్యూటీస్ అనగానే దే టాక్ అబౌట్ పార్ట్ 4A ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్, అంతే కదా. చాలామందికి తెలిసిన ఫ్యాక్ట్ ఏంటిదంటే, the fact that is commonly known is, right, fundamental duties are present in part 4A, right. I'm just giving this information. So we have part 4A which deals with fundamental duties, alright, which was added to constitution by 42nd Amendment Act. It was added by 42nd Amendment Act, right, in 1976 on the recommendations of Swaran Singh Committee. On the recommendations of Swaran Singh committee. Okay, this is what we all know. Alright, but remember, originally, alright, even before this 42nd Amendment Act, even before this 42nd Amendment Act, the duties are given as a part and parcel of rights in Part 3. So Part 3 contains not only the rights given to citizens, along with the rights, responsibilities are also imposed on citizens of the nation. Not only the rights, but also the responsibilities are imposed. The responsibilities are imposed on the rights, on the individuals. So duties and responsibilities are also imposed on the individuals, right? So that means, right, duties are mentioned in Part 3 of Indian Constitution. All right, I'll give one example. When we talk about Article 19, all right, when we talk about Article 19, Article 19 deals with specific freedoms. Article 19 deals with specific freedoms, right? Article 19 class 1. So we have A, B, C, D and so on, right? There are specific freedoms mentioned in Constitution, right? But these freedoms can be restricted, alright? The freedoms of individuals can be restricted when there is a violation of the conditions mentioned in Article 19 class 2. So Article 19 class 2 deals with conditions within which the individual can enjoy the freedoms. So as long as these conditions are fulfilled, individuals have every right to enjoy the freedoms. But if these conditions are violated, the freedoms of individuals can be restricted. Say for example, the conditions includes, right, respecting unity, integrity, sovereignty of the nation, promoting social order, right, public order, public morality. So you see all these words in Article 19. You see the words like sovereignty, unity, integrity, public order, public morality, decency. So it is the duty of every individual. It is the duty of every individual to protect these, to follow these conditions. So it is a duty. That means what? There are duties in Article 19 itself. So it is the when the rights of individuals can be restricted. Rights of individuals can be restricted whenever they are required to render certain services. So whenever individuals are called upon to render services, all such services should be rendered by citizens of the nation. That is, whenever the individuals are called upon, అంటే నేషన్ కోసం సర్వీసెస్ని ఇవ్వాల్సి వచ్చినప్పుడు అక్కడ రైట్స్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ కాదు, డ్యూటీసే ఇంపార్టెంట్. So duties are given importance over the rights, and whenever a citizen is called to render the services, it is a duty of the citizen to render all such services, right? Failing to render services will be a ground for restricting the rights of individuals. So these are the clear hints, right, showing that, all right, these are the clear hints showing that duties are mentioned in Part 3. Along with rights, there are also duties. So rights and duties are a part and parcel. You cannot separate rights and duties. Alright? So one of the hallmark of Indian Constitution, one of the outstanding feature of Indian Constitution is presence of both rights and duties. Alright? So we can say that violation of a duty is a ground for imposing restrictions on the rights of individuals. Failure to perform duties, it is a ground to impose restrictions failure to perform duties it is a ground for imposing restrictions on the rights of individuals. Alright, so duties is a restriction on the rights of individual. And as long as duties are performed, you can enjoy the rights. If you fail to perform duties, you have no right to enjoy the rights. Right? So that is what the relation between duties and rights. So this is another outstanding feature of Indian Constitution. This is another outstanding feature of Indian Constitution. So duties are not only given to the individuals, duties are not only imposed on the citizens, but even state is also given the duties, right? So our constitution has imposed the moral obligations. It has imposed a duty on the government, duty on the state. So if you take part 4, part 4 of Indian Constitution, part 4 of Indian Constitution deals with these duties of the state, deals with the duties of state. So these duties, they are in the form of DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. They are in the form of Directive Principles of State Policy. Alright, so which are taken from Irish Constitution, that is from Ireland. These duties are these duties of the state are taken from Ireland. Alright, say if you take this DPSP, they act as directives. They act as directives. They act as guidelines. Alright, guidelines to whom? Guidelines to the government of the day. They are the guidelines given by the Constitution. They are directives given by the Constitution. So that is, it is the duty of the state. It is the duty of the state to follow these guidelines. Right? Ultimately, the purpose of these guidelines, ultimately the purpose of these directives is to establish a welfare state. Ultimately, the duty of this DPSP is to establish a welfare state. Alright? So which is clearly mentioned in Article 38 of the Constitution. Alright? The goal of welfare state, is clearly mentioned in, it is clearly mentioned in, alright, Article 38 of the Constitution. Alright? So, and these guidelines, they act as a fundamental law. They act as a fundamental law in the governance of the nation. Right? So, according to Article 37, that means the government should follow, the government need to follow these guidelines, the government need to follow these directives in its welfare policy making. Say for example, health policy, education policy, agriculture policy, livelihood policy. So in its policy making, the government should follow these principles, right? Because the aim is to establish what? The aim is to establish a welfare state, right? The purpose of this guidelines, is to establish a welfare state. Alright, that is, the purpose is to have a nation where there are no inequalities. Alright, so this is another outstanding feature. So duties are imposed on individual and duties are also imposed on the state. Alright, that is on the government. So government is required to follow these guidelines. Right? Government is required to follow these guidelines. Alright. Now, if I'll give one few examples of this DPSP. So DPSP states that it is the duty of the state to abolish intoxicating drinks. Alright. Now, whether state have abolished? Do you think that the government has abolished consumption, or what you call, it has abolished this what you call consumption of intoxicating drinks, alcoholic drinks, right? Abolish చేసిందా? మత్తు పదార్థాలు, మత్తు పానీయాలు, రైట్? సో అలాంటి అబాలిష్ చేసిందా? ఎందుకు చేయలేదు? అచ్చా, రెవెన్యూ అక్కడి నుంచి వస్తుంది కాబట్టి. అది లేకపోతే రెవెన్యూ లేదు. ఎక్కువ రెవెన్యూ అంటే గవర్నమెంట్కి రెవెన్యూ కావాలంటే అందరు తాగి పడుకోవాలి, రైట్? ఓకే, డన్, రైట్. మరి గవర్నమెంట్ ఫెయిల్ అయింది కదా ఇక్కడ, దీన్ని ఫాలో కాలే కదా. కెన్ యూ క్వశ్చన్ ది గవర్నమెంట్? Can you question the government as it has not followed the directives of constitution? Can you question the government? Alright? Question chesina, you cannot have any kind of remedy. The reason is, if you take rights are justiciable. Rights are justiciable. That is, they are guaranteed, they are justiciable. That means the individual can question the government in a court of law when rights are not protected, and the individuals can get remedy. Whereas if you take these duties, these are non-justiciable rights of individuals. Remember, these DPSP, they are non-justiciable rights. They are non-justiciable rights of individuals. Fundamental rights are justiciable rights. These are non-justiciable rights. That means the individual cannot have any remedy. The individual cannot claim a remedy. The individual cannot claim a remedy. The individuals cannot claim a remedy for violation of this DPSP. For violation of DPSP, the individuals cannot claim a remedy. Alright? So that is the basic difference. That is the basic difference between fundamental rights and DPSP. So primacy is always given. Primacy is always given, or importance is always given to fundamental rights. Importance is always given to part 3 over part 4. So when you see the relation between part 3 and part 4, importance is given to part 3 when compared to part 4. Right? So part 3 prevails over part 4 of Indian Constitution. So in case of conflict, the primacy is given to part 3 over part 4 of Indian Constitution. Right? So this is, right, the outstanding feature of DPSP. So we have seen fundamental rights, fundamental duties, as well as duties of the government, that is DPSP. Right? Am I clear on these points? Right? Going to other outstanding features. Right? So the framers of constitution have provided decentralized governance or local self-governments in the form of Panchayat Raj institutions. The framers of constitution have provided Panchayat Raj institutions, which are examples of local bodies or local governance, local governments. Right? So it is this Panchayat Raj institutions which promote grassroots level democracy. They promote grassroots level democracy. That is where people can participate. Where people can participate in political decision making process. So it is called as grassroots level democratic institutions because people can participate in political decision making process. Political decision making process. Alright? So this is one thing. Right? So most of us have an idea that these Panchayat Raj institutions were created by 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts. Right? It is 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts which have created this Panchayat Raj institutions. Right? But remember, though they came to existence, though these were created by 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts, but remember there is one article, that is Article 40 of Indian Constitution. Alright? So don't forget this Article 40. So just now we have talked about DPSP, right? So DPSP, they not only act as a fundamental law in the governance of the nation, but they also impose a moral obligation on the state. Alright? So DPSP also imposes a moral obligation. So if you take this Article 40, so Article 40 clearly states that it is the duty of the state to organize village panchayats. So there is a moral obligation in Article 40. There is a moral obligation imposed on the state where it is the duty of the state to organize village panchayats. Organize village panchayats. So it is the moral obligation. It is the moral obligation. All right. All right. That means this institution of Panchayat Raj, the PRIs, they have roots in this Article 40. Right? They have roots in Article 40. That means don't just restrict PRIs only to 73rd or 74th Amendment Acts. Don't restrict these PRIs to 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts. They have roots in Article 40 of the Constitution. Okay, na? So this is what you should remember. So all these are, so we have discussed various features of Indian Constitution. So I'll end I'll end this topic of salient features of Indian Constitution, right? So we have started with written Constitution. All right, we started with written Constitution, right? Supremacy of Constitution, single Constitution, constitutionalism. Then we have seen parliamentary system of government, quasi federal system, rigid and flexible Constitution. All right, then we have talked about rule of law and all this so on. All right, so these are different salient features of Indian Constitution. All right, take down a question on this point. Take down a question on this. Briefly discuss the salient features. Briefly discuss the salient features of Indian Constitution. So here, so you have so many features. So when you are writing answer, write your answer, restrict your answer to 5 features. So write the 5 most important features of Indian Constitution. Right? So write 5 most important features of Indian Constitution. Five most important features of Indian Constitution. Alright? So this is what about salient features of Indian Constitution. Alright? So next we move on to the topic of preamble. Alright? Preamble of Indian Constitution. Preamble of Indian Constitution. So wherever there are written constitutions, wherever there are written constitutions, right, we see preamble. So preamble is a part and parcel of written constitutions. Alright. So the idea of having preamble, it was taken from which constitution? From which constitution we have adopted this idea of preamble? From which constitution we have took this idea of preamble? Just use your common sense logic. From give me one answer. Don't say all the countries in the world. It is not Canada, it is not Britain. From where we have adopted written constitutions? What is the first written constitution in the world? American Constitution. America being the first written constitution, and we have adopted this written system from America. So obviously, wherever there is written constitution, there will be preamble. That means what? Even the idea of having preamble is taken from American Constitution. It is from American Constitution. Right? The idea of having preamble is taken from American Constitution. Okay? So, this is one thing. Alright? So, this preamble, the idea of having preamble is taken from American Constitution. So, this preamble acts as, right, it acts as a preface of Indian Constitution. It acts as a preface. It acts as a foreword. Preface or a foreword of Indian Constitution. That means what? Have you ever read preface in your textbooks? You take any textbook. You have, right, you will be having a preface, you will be having a foreword. Have you ever read a preface? What does that preface consist of? It deals with the entire summary of the book. Alright? You take any preface, alright? Preface gives us the idea. Preface gives us the idea about the textbooks. Alright? So that means what? This preamble provides the summary of Indian Constitution. Provides a summary of Indian Constitution. Okay? So preface, that is forward or. So that means what? By seeing the preface, we can also understand, right? It acts as a key to the mind of framers of Constitution. Right? So if you want to understand the Constitution, just by reading the preamble, you can have a complete idea about Indian Constitution. That is what Indian Constitution is, what sort of state, what sort of society, what sort of government that the Indian Constitution establishes. Alright, in the previous exam, alright, there was a question about the kind of identity that is established by Constitution. So what kind of identity that a Constitution establishes? Fundamental identity, moral identity, political identity, religious identity. There are different types of identities. So what kind of identities? So no one has answered the question. So they are not my own questions. If you go to NCERT book, you can directly get the answers. Those questions are directly taken from NCERT textbook, NCERT class 11. What is a Constitution? The very first chapter. Remember, it is very, very important for every candidate, right, to read that NCERT book. Don't think that they are silly. Though they are silly, but no one answers the questions. చూడడానికి చాలా సిల్లీగా అనిపిస్తాయి, కానీ ఎవరు ఆన్సర్ చేయలేదు వాటిని. ఎవరు ఆన్సర్ చేయలేరు కూడా. రేపు ఎగ్జామ్లో మిస్టేక్స్ అయ్యే అవే. ఇక్కడ చాలా లైట్ తీసుకుంటాం, చాలా ఈజీగా తీసుకుంటాం, కానీ ఎగ్జామ్లో మాత్రం చాలా కన్ఫ్యూజ్ అవుతుంది. ఎలాంటి ఐడెంటిటీ కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ చేస్తుంది? సో వాట్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ ఐడెంటిటీ ఈజ్ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ బై కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్? ఇట్ ఈస్ ఫండమెంటల్, పొలిటికల్, మోరల్ ఐడెంటిటీస్. రైట్? సో preamble gives us the idea. It gives us what you call idea about nature of state. What is Indian state? India is a sovereign nation. India is a republic nation. Right? It gives us a nature of state. It gives us the idea of nature of society. Nature of society. What kind of society is India is? A democratic society where people enjoy liberty, freedom. Right? All these words are mentioned in preamble itself. They are not my own words. Right? They are not my own words. They are clearly mentioned. They are clearly described in Indian Constitution. The nature of society. That's right. So if you take the hallmark of Indian society is secular society. The hallmark of Indian society is a secular society. Alright? So it gives us the nature of government. How powers are distributed. If you take government, alright? So government is the one which is elected by people, a democratic government consisting of elected executive. What do you mean by democratic nation? Right? One of the forms of democracy is a government being elected, which we call it as political democracy. Right? So preamble gives us the idea about the nature of government. Elanti government undi. So whether it is elected government or authoritarian governments, or despotic governments, niyantatvam. Right? So what kind of governments are given? So preamble gives us the idea about all these things. It provides the objectives. It provides objectives to be achieved. It provides us the goals. Goals or objectives. Goals are objectives. So what kind of goals are to be achieved? For what the government should work for? To which goal the government should strive for? Right? So it provides value preferences. Preamble provides value preferences. Values means what? Value preferences. It is the end preferences of the government, end preference of the state. Equality is one preference. Justice, liberty, freedoms, all these are preferences. Alright? So values means the preferences given by constitution. So mana constitution deni prefer చేస్తుంది, దేనికి ఇంపార్టెన్స్ ఇస్తుంది, గవర్నమెంట్ దేనికోసం పనిచేయాలి, అవన్నీ చెప్పేది ఎక్కడ, అవన్నీ చెప్పేది ఎవరు? ప్రియాంబుల్. సో ప్రియాంబుల్ గివ్స్ us the idea. Preamble gives us the idea about these value preferences. Right? It gives us the idea about the goals and objectives. Alright? Philosophy of Indian Constitution. Philosophy of Indian Constitution. It talks ethical and moral tone of Indian Constitution. Ethical and moral tones. So the provisions of Constitution, right? The provisions of Constitution acts as the principles to be followed. The principles to be followed by whom? Constitutional provisions ever follow కావాలి? మీరా నేనా? అందరమా? గవర్నమెంటా? ప్రజల గవర్నమెంటా? గవర్నమెంట్ ప్రజలు అందరూ. అంటే these are the ethical principles which are to be followed by both government as well as the people, the society. What we should do, what we need to do, what are our moral responsibilities, all these are clearly mentioned in preamble. So preamble provides the idea, it provides both the ethical and moral principles, right? So this is the significance or importance of preamble, right? Supreme Court in Berubari case, Supreme Court in Berubari case has observed that preamble is a key to the minds of framers of Indian Constitution, right? So let me talk about the significance in the words of Supreme Court. So Supreme Court in Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan case. Supreme Court in Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan case held that preamble is epitome of broader principles of Constitution. It is regarded as, preamble is regarded as epitome of broader principles of Constitution. Epitome of broader principles of Constitution. Alright? That means the entire Constitution, all the provisions of Constitution, right? It is regarded as epitome of broader principles of Constitution. Alright? That means the entire Constitution, all the provisions of Indian Constitution, they are imbibed within preamble. Alright? I'll give one example. Alright? Liberty. What do you mean by liberty? Translation, huh? Alright? Alright? So freedom from all the forms of restrictions. Basically, it is freedom from all the forms of restrictions or freedom from all the constraints. Liberty. Alright? So if we take Part 3 of Indian Constitution, just now we have talked about Part 3. That is, what does Part 3 deals with? Fundamental rights, where the purpose of fundamental rights is to provide liberty, to ensure liberty and freedoms. That means the entire Part 3 of Indian Constitution, it is just, it is mentioned by one word, that is liberty. Liberty connotes, the word liberty connotes the entire essence of Part 3. That is how we can say that liberty is a broader principle. Equality is a broader principle. Democracy is a broader principle. So in that sense we can say that preamble is epitome of broader principles of Constitution. Alright? So I'm giving how to think, ela alochinchali. Alright? When a statement is given to you, how you need to think and how you need to start your answer. Alright? How you should start your answer. Alright? So this is what the Supreme Court view in Sajjan Singh case. Alright? In Golaknath case, Supreme Court held that preamble is eternal part of Indian Constitution. It is eternal and it is the soul of Indian Constitution. It is described as, preamble is described as in Golaknath case, it is described as eternal and soul of Indian Constitution. What do you mean by eternal and soul? What do you mean by eternal and soul of Constitution? Soul means what? The indestructible part of human beings. Right? Body can be destroyed, but soul, can it be destroyed? Atmaram cannot be destroyed. మనిషి చచ్చిపోతాడు కానీ సోల్కి ఆత్మకు చావు ఉండదు. రైట్? ఆత్మ ఎప్పటి వరకు ఉంటుంది? అమ్మా ఫర్ ఎవర్ ఉంటుందా? కోరికలని తీరే వరకు ఉంటుంది. కోరికలను తీరిపోయాక ఆత్మ పోతుంది. ఎలాంటి కోరికలు? ఐఏఎస్ ఐపీఎస్ కొట్టేంత వరకు. కొట్టలేదనుకోండి, రైట్, వాట్ ఆత్మ విల్ డూ? మీరు సర్వీస్ కొట్టలేదనుకోండి, వాట్ వియర్ ఆత్మ విల్ డూ? ఇక్కడిక్కడనే తిరుగుతూ ఉంటుంది. ఇదే ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ పక్కన తిరుగుతూ ఉంటుంది. ఇదే అశోక్ నగర్లో ఉంటుంది. ఐ సీన్ పీపుల్, నాతో పాటు ప్రిపరేషన్ స్టార్ట్ చేసిన వాళ్ళు కూడా ఇంకా ప్రిపేర్ అవుతూనే ఉన్నారు లాస్ట్ 15-20 ఇయర్స్ నుంచి. రైట్? ఐ సీన్. రైట్? అంటే 2004, 2002లో ప్రిపరేషన్ స్టార్ట్ చేసిన వాళ్ళు కూడా ఉన్నారు ఇంక ఇక్కడ అశోక్ నగర్లో. రైట్? సో నేనంటే మధ్యలో వాలంటరీ రిటైర్మెంట్, బికాస్ After completing my attempts, somehow I got placed in a state government. నాకు జాబ్ వచ్చింది కాబట్టి నడిచింది. రైట్, జాబ్ రాకపోయినా కానీ నీకు వెళ్ళిపోయేటోని. కానీ కొంతమంది ఉంటారు, అశోక్ నగర్ గాలి నీళ్లు పడ్డ తర్వాత ఇక్కడి నుంచి ఓరు వాళ్ళు. రైట్, అందుకనే వాళ్ళకు బిరుదు ఇచ్చిన నేను, అశోకరత్న, భారతరత్న లెక్క. అశోకరత్న అంటే ఎవరంటే జీవితకాలం అశోక్ నగర్ ఉండేటోళ్ళు. రైట్, సో డోంట్ బికమ్ రత్నాస్, బికమ్ సర్వెంట్స్. రైట్, సివిల్ సర్వెంట్స్. రైట్, so that is what soul is undestructible. So whether preamble can be destroyed? No, preamble is undestructible. So that is the meaning, that is the essence of preamble. So preamble acts as eternal part of Indian constitution. Preamble is eternal and it is soul of constitution. Preamble is eternal and soul of constitution. All right, that is which cannot be destroyed. The preamble cannot be destroyed. The preamble cannot be destroyed. Alright, so Supreme Court in Bharati Chandra Bhavan case, it was held that Supreme Court held that, alright, preamble helps us to remove ambiguities in understanding constitution. Right, so preamble is the one which helps us to understand, all right, understand constitution and remove the ambiguities. So whenever there is a confusion in understanding constitution, or whenever there is a dilemma of giving preferences, so you can use preamble to remove these dilemmas. Preamble helps us to remove all sorts of confusion. Say for example, part 3 and part 4. Part 3 talks about individual good, part 4 talks about collective good. Alright, so what should be given importance, whether part 3 or part 4? No, it is a dilemma. Alright, to remove this dilemma, right, what can be used? So preamble helps us to remove these kind of dilemmas. Right, so it helps us to remove the kind of ambiguities in constitution. Right, so these what you call views of Supreme Court, these views of Supreme Court, right, provides us the significance of preamble. Right, so we have seen, right, the different elements, that is the importance of preamble, not only in a general word but also by using Supreme Court judgments. Right, so take down a question in this regard. So always try to maintain a question bank. So on each and every topic I'm giving questions. So by the end of polity you will get 250 to 300 questions. If you practice that 300 questions, it is more and more than enough. You will be asked around 5 to 7 questions in mains. That 5 to 7 questions will be from these 300 questions. I am challenging. Alright, చాలా మంది ఏం చేస్తారంటే క్వశ్చన్స్ ఇచ్చినప్పుడు ఎవ్వడు పెద్దగా పట్టించుకోడు. మెయిన్స్ ఎగ్జామ్ అయిపోయినాక అప్పుడు వస్తారు, వచ్చి సార్ మీరు చెప్పిన వచ్చినాయి సార్ అని చెప్తారు. లాభం లేదు. ఎగ్జామ్ అయిపోయినాక కళ్ళు తీసుకోవడం లాభం లేదు. వాట్ యూ నీడ్ టు డూ ఈజ్ రైట్ బిఫోర్ ది ఎగ్జామ్, right, irrespective whether they are asked or not, you need to practice it. Right, so in my subject on each and every topic I have the habit of giving questions. Right, So, alright, make this in a separate book and try to write answers. Alright, there were days 2021 question paper anukunta, GS paper 2. Alright, I was teaching in Sharachandra Academy. In GS paper 2, out of 20 questions, 16 questions have come from my class. దాని రికార్డ్ ఏంటంటే నేను ప్రాక్టీస్ టెస్ట్లు పెట్టినవి ఉంటాయి. In 2018, out of 20, 14 questions have come. Alright, so same thing even in public administration. PubAd lo you can expect 70% of questions from the class. Alright, and you can directly use the information in the exam. Alright, one of my student, alright, I was saying, in his 4 GS papers he could not cross 90 marks. He took GS with CSB and PubAd with me. Alright, only and that too he wrote only 4 tests in public administration, and just before the exam I had almost 6 hours of revision for them, and he got 256 just with 3 tests and 6 hours of revision. Right, so I always believe that, right, if you are good in answer writing, if you can really and sincerely follow the questions which are given in the class, you can score more than 120 marks in GS paper 2. Remember, GS paper 2, GS paper 3, GS paper 4, that is polity governance paper, economy paper and ethics paper. These are the scoring papers. You can score 110 plus marks in these papers, right, which will change your fate. Your entire life will change. మొత్తం యూటర్న్ తీసుకుంటుంది. ఇది మీరు కొంచెం బాగా ప్రాక్టీస్ చేసింది అనుకోండి. ఇఫ్ యూ ప్రాక్టీస్, రైట్, యూ కెన్ స్కోర్ 110 plus marks. Right, if you are right, if you fail to practice, your marks won't be more than 70. Alright, so do start practicing answers. Right, take to the question. Explain the significance of preamble. Explain the significance of preamble by using. Explain the significance of preamble by using Supreme Court judgments. Explain the significance of preamble by using Supreme Court judgments. This is one question. Second question, preamble acts as epitome of broader principles of constitution. Epitome of broader principles of constitution. Justify it. Justify. Broader principles of constitution, justify. Okay, so we'll take a break of 5 minutes, then after 5 minutes again we'll meet. So this is what about the significance of preamble. All right, let us now go to the issue of amendability of preamble, right? Because there was a debate on amendability of preamble. Whether preamble can be amended or not. Whether preamble can be amended or not. So this is the issue. All right. As I said earlier in the previous class, Article 368 of the Constitution. It is Article 368 of the Constitution that deals with Article 368 of Constitution deals with the amending procedure. It deals with amending procedure, right? So in this class, let us examine whether this amending procedure can be adapted to preamble or not, right? So initially, if we take these two important cases, one is Berubari case, other one is Keshavananda Bharati case. One is Berubari case, other one is Keshavananda Bharati case, right? So these are two important cases, all right, that we should remember for this issue, all right? So initially, this debate on amending preamble, the debate on amending preamble has come in the issue of Berubari. So Berubari is a village in Bengal, in West Bengal, which was transferred to East Pakistan, that is present day Bangladesh. All right. So that means Indian territory has been given to other country, right? So there is an effect on sovereignty of Indian Union. Of course, it is by agreement between Government of India and the other government, right? This transfer of territory took place. So when the issue has come in Supreme Court that's held that preamble is not a part of Constitution, all right? Preamble is not a part of Constitution. It is not a part of Constitution. So the issue of amending preamble doesn't comes out or doesn't arises. As it is not a part of Constitution, the issue of amending preamble doesn't comes. It doesn't comes. All right. So why it is not a part of preamble? So what is a part of Constitution? What is not a part of Constitution? So Supreme Court held that every provision of Indian Constitution that is added by voting is called as a part. Any provision, any part that is added to Constitution by voting is called as, it is treated as a part of Constitution. But coming to preamble is not added by voting. So this section, this preface of Indian Constitution, it was added without any voting. So as it is added without any voting, it can't be treated as part of Indian Constitution. So as it is not a part of Constitution, the issue of amending will not arise, or the Article 368 is not applicable to preamble. So this is what the opinion given by Supreme Court in Berubari case. But, all right, so what is the basis of this preamble? What is the background or base of preamble? The objective resolution that is passed in the Constituent Assembly. Remember, in December 1946, alright, objective resolution was passed, and it is this objective resolution which is not only the guiding spirit of Constitution, but also it is a basis of preamble. Alright, so take this objective resolution. It is objective resolution that is passed in 1946. It is objective resolution that is passed in 1946. which is the basis for what you call preamble. And the debate on this preamble was raised by Radhakrishnan, right? It was Sarvepalli Radhakrishna who has raised a debate on preamble in the Constituent Assembly. There was a debate went on, and it is after the debate the preamble was added to Constitution, right? So that means what? Preamble cannot be treated as outside of Constitution. It is a part and parcel of Constitution, right? That is what we should know. But there was a misinterpretation of preamble in Berubari case, which was corrected by Supreme Court in Keshavananda Bharati case, right? In Keshavananda Bharati case, Supreme Court held that preamble is a part of Indian Constitution. Preamble is a part of Indian Constitution. So Article 368 is also applicable to preamble. That means Parliament has every power to amend preamble. So if you take this importance of Keshavananda Bharati case, it was in this case Supreme Court held that Parliament has every power. Parliament has every power to amend the Constitution. Parliament has the power to amend Constitution. Okay, but right, without affecting basic structure of Indian Constitution. Without affecting basic structure of Indian Constitution. So Supreme Court clearly said that Parliament by following Article 368, it can amend any part of Indian Constitution including preamble, fundamental rights, but without violating the basic structure. That means the importance of preamble cannot be undermined. The philosophy of preamble cannot be amended, right? Or the philosophy of preamble cannot be undermined. Simply to say, you can add anything to the Constitution, but you cannot remove the existing philosophy. You cannot remove the existing importance. అంటే స్థాయిని తగ్గించకూడదు. మీరు ఏదైనా చేంజెస్ చేసుకోండి, ఏదన్నా యాడ్ చేసుకోండి, కానీ ఉన్నదాన్ని తీయకండి, ఉన్నదాన్ని తీసేయకండి. అంటే ఉన్నదాన్ని if the existing elements are removed, what happens? The importance will come down, right? The significance of the Constitution will be undermined. So without undermining the significance, without undermining the importance of Constitution, bring any kind of change, right? So that is what basic structure. You take democracy, basic structure, all right? So parliamentary system of government, basic structure. So Supreme Court went on to give a different elements of basic structure. So over a period of time, so it was in 1973, the Supreme Court has given this Keshavananda Bharati case judgment. That is, this case was in 1973. From 1973 onwards, Supreme Court went on increasing the list of basic structures. Initially it was with 6, then now almost all 17, 18, and tomorrow there is an every chance of adding more number of features to the list of basic structures, right? So again I'll discuss this topic when we discuss Article 368. But as the issue is about amending the preamble, so preamble now can be amended. So after Keshavananda Bharati case, now it is clear that preamble is a part and parcel of Constitution and it can be amended provided the basic structure of Constitution, the basic structure of preamble cannot be undermined, right? So in LIC versus Union of India case, Supreme Court held that preamble is an integral part of Constitution, all right? All right, you can see the word secular was added to the Constitution, right? You cannot remove it. See here, the basic structure cannot be removed, the basic structure cannot be violated, right? So there were many debates during these elections, all right? So the opposition parties claims that, right, once the ruling party comes into power, right, they will remove this word secularism. There is a threat to secularism. See here, don't think about secularism. I'll give one simple thing, right? The word secular was not originally present in the preamble. Coming to preamble, it was not there in preamble, but it was there in article 25 as well as article 26, right? Remember, the word secular is present both in article 25 as well as article 26. Okay, they were, but coming to preamble, it was not present originally. But if you take one word, that is the word of liberty. Liberty of faith, liberty of worship, liberty of belief. So you have these things in our constitution. You have liberty of belief, you have liberty of faith, and you have liberty of worship. Do you have or not? That means every individual has this freedom. Every individual has the liberty of following their own faith. నీ ఇష్టమున్న దేవుణ్ణి ఫాలోగా, రైట్? There was a recent judge, there was a case filed in Supreme Court regarding application of Shariat law. One of the women from Kerala has filed that, all right? She has claimed a right to property, right? She has claimed a right to inherit the property of parents, right? Though she is non-believer of Islam, right? She claimed that, right? She is not a believer of Islam, but she wanted the right to inherit the property, right? There is a debate on this. So following faith or not following the faith, it is up to you. It is up to the individual. It is up to the individual to follow the faith or not to follow the faith. And according to Shariat law of 1937, right, there are inheritance rights given to the daughters, but there are certain conditions. There are certain categories of people, or there are certain categories of heirs, right, who are given the right to inherit property. If you don't follow Islam, right, there is an every debate that the Shariat law will not be applicable on you. Right? If Shariat law is not applicable on that lady, there is Indian Inheritance Act 1927. Sorry, Indian Inheritance Act of 1925. I am not sure of the year. It is 25 or 22. Right? But we have this Indian Inheritance Act. Alright, so I am not sure of the year. Alright, but if Shariat law is not followed, then there is an act, a law that is applicable to everyone, a secular act. Alright, so that is what we have. So here the point here is, it is not about the issue. The point here is, every individual have the liberty of following faith or not. The word secular is only to glorify this right. The word secular that was added to preamble, it is only to highlight. సెక్యులర్ అన్న పదము మనకున్న రైట్ని హైలైట్ చేయడానికి ఉంది, కానీ సెక్యులర్ అన్న పదం యాడ్ చేయకముందే మనకు రైట్ ఉన్నది. రైట్, లిబర్టీ అన్న పదము కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఎప్పుడైతే ఎన్ఫోర్స్మెంట్లోకి వచ్చిందో ఆ రోజు నుంచి మనకి లిబర్టీ ఉన్నది. దేవుణ్ణి, వర్షిప్ని, అంటే బిలీఫ్ని, ప్రిన్సిపల్స్ని, ఫెయిత్ని, అది నీ ఇష్టం, ఫాలో కావడం, ఫాలో కాకపోవడం. అంటే ఏంటిది? సెక్యులర్ ఫిలాసఫీ అన్నది మన కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ స్టార్ట్ అయిన రోజు నుంచే ఉన్నది. అది మధ్యలో రాలేదు, మధ్యలో పోదు. So the point here is, if you take right to property, many of the people might have this kind of fear that same as right to property was removed, even the right to religious freedom, article 25, 26 may be removed. If you take this right to property, what is the reason for removing the right to property? Right to property is what we call hindrance in the establishment of welfare state. Right to property is a hindrance. Alright, అదొక అడ్డు. వెల్ఫేర్ స్టేట్ ఎస్టాబ్లిష్మెంట్లో రైట్ టు ప్రాపర్టీ దాని అంటే ఒక రోడ్ బ్లాక్ లాంటిది, అది తొలగించాల్సిందే. రైట్, ఇట్ షుడ్ బి రిమూవ్డ్. అదే ఇఫ్ యు టేక్ ద సేమ్ కైండ్, ఇఫ్ యు టేక్ ద కమింగ్ టు ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ సెక్యులర్, whether secular state is essential for welfare state or not. Can we see secular state as a hurdle for welfare state? No. Alright, what do you mean by welfare state? A state where there are no inequalities. Right, without having a secular state, then it is possible to remove inequalities. No, inequalities can be removed only when there is secularism. So how can you apply the logic of Article 31 into this Article 25 or 26? అంటే చెప్తున్నా, అంటే ఈవెన్ రేపు మనం రేపు ఎగ్జామ్లో ఆన్సర్ రాసేటప్పుడు కూడా ఇదే పాయింట్ చెప్పాలి. ద లాజిక్ ఆఫ్ అప్లయింగ్ వాట్ యు కాల్ వెల్ఫేర్ స్టేట్ ఇన్ ఆర్టికల్ 31 హ్యాస్ నో మీనింగ్ ఇన్ వాట్ యు కాల్ సెక్యులర్ స్టేట్. రైట్, సో అక్కడ అది సెక్యులర్ స్టేట్కి ఆర్టికల్ 31 ఈజ్ హర్డిల్ ఫర్ వెల్ఫేర్ స్టేట్, బట్ సెక్యులర్ స్టేట్ ఈజ్ ఎసెన్షియల్ ఫర్ వెల్ఫేర్ స్టేట్. రైట్, ఓకేనా. సుప్రీం కోర్ట్ ఇన్ ఎస్ఆర్ బొమ్మాయి వర్సెస్ యూనియన్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా కేస్, సందర్భం వచ్చింది కాబట్టి చెప్తున్నా. సుప్రీం కోర్ట్ ఇన్ ఎస్ఆర్ బొమ్మాయి వర్సెస్ యూనియన్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా కేస్. సుప్రీం కోర్ట్ ఇన్ దిస్ కేస్ has clearly held that, Supreme Court in this case clearly held that, right, secularism is a basic structure of Indian constitution. Secularism is a basic structure of Indian constitution which cannot be removed, right, which cannot be violated. Right, so secularism can never be violated. Secularism can never be violated. Okay, so this is what sector, what you call the point is. So now coming to the LIC versus Union of India case, so we got diverted from this point. In this LIC versus Union of India case, Supreme Court held that preamble is integral part of constitution. Preamble is integral part of constitution. It is integral part of the constitution. Alright, that means what? It is a part, it is an integral part. So you cannot separate preamble from Indian constitution. So the procedure for amendment to constitution, it is equally applicable, to preamble. That means what? Preamble can be amended. Right, am I clear on this debate? So we started with the debate that preamble cannot be amended, but at the end we said that, we concluded that preamble can be amended. Right, take down a question on this point. Discuss the debate on the debate on amendability of preamble. Discuss the debate on amendability of preamble. Discuss the debate on amendability of preamble. Okay, alright. So now let us go into each and every word of preamble. Alright, say we don't have any specific constitutional provision, alright, that calls India as a sovereign. If you take the first line of preamble, we the people of India, alright, we the people of India solemnly resolve to establish India as an sovereign nation. Alright, so India is a sovereign. Sovereign nation means a nation that is free, that is independent from all the external control. Alright, a nation that is free from all the external controls. Alright, a nation that is free from all the forms of external controls. Alright, that is what you call a sovereign nation is. Alright, freedom from external control, that is no country controls India. India is not subordinate to any country. India is not subordinate to any nation. That is, we are totally free and independent nation. Free and independent nation. So independent from all the forms of control. Second one is, all right, a nation, all right, that derives its power, that draws its power from its own people. So sovereignty also denotes, all right, people as source of power and authority. So draws authority from people. So people are the source of power and authority. People are source of power and authority. That means the entire constitution, if you take every organ of the state, you take legislature, executive and judiciary, from where these organs derive their power? It is from the constitution. From where constitution derives its power? It is from people, right? So every organ of the state, they derive their power from constitution. They derive their power from constitution. Whereas constitution derives its power from people. People are the source of power. People are the source of power. Alright? So this is what sovereignty means. Right? So freedom from external control, freedom in independence in political decision making. Sovereignty denotes independence. Independence in political decision making. Right? A nation, sovereignty also denotes a nation which derives its power from its own people. So before independence, from where we have drawn our power? What was the source of Indian constitution? What was the source of political power? Whether people of India or the laws made in British Parliament and British Queen. Before independence, what was the source of power for India? It is from Britain. It is British Parliament. It is British Queen. The laws made in British Parliament. We were under the external control. That is the reason why we cannot call ourselves as sovereign before independence. It is only after enactment of constitution. Remember, it is only after enactment of constitution India became a sovereign nation. Alright? We have become sovereign. We have become sovereign. It is only after commencement of constitution. It is only after commencement of constitution we have become a sovereign nation. Right? So that means India as a nation derives its authority from its constitution, that is through its people. Who framed constitution? Constituent Assembly. What Constituent Assembly consisted of? The representatives of people. Alright? Constituent Assembly consisted of the representatives of people. That is the reason why we say people as source of power and authority. People as source of power and authority. Alright? So that is what sovereignty means. Alright? So sovereign existence. Sovereign existence means independent existence. Independence in political decision making. Okay? Now nowadays we see one trend, right? A trend of influence of global institutions on the member countries. Influence of global institutions. Influence of global institutions on member countries. Say for example, you say the influence of UN, alright, say the World Bank, IMF. So we have such global institutions. So it is these global institutions which are exerting, which are exercising their authority on the member countries. Don't you think that because of this influence, because of this pressure exerted by the global institutions, the countries are losing their independence in political decision making? Don't you think that the countries are losing their political independence in political decision making? The conditionalities imposed on the member countries. Say for example, World Bank and IMF, they are always known for what? They are always known for imposing of conditionalities before giving the package. Before giving the package, they are always known for this kind of conditions. Recently we have seen the conditions imposed on Pakistan, where Pakistan was given $1.1 billion as a bailout package for them, right, and under the special arrangement, right. So don't you think that these conditions are against the principle of sovereignty, and countries are forced to accept them? Membership to these global institutions and accepting these conditions, don't you see it as a violation to the philosophy of sovereignty? Sovereignty అవి వాలేట్ చేయట్లేదా? Remember, there is one point, right? Membership to these global institutions, it is a voluntary act of the countries. It is the countries, వాళ్ళకు కంట్రీస్ తనకు తానుగా జాయిన్ అవుతున్నాయి, కానీ కంట్రీస్ మీద ఎవరు ఫోర్స్ చేయట్లేదు, ఎవరు కూడా అంటే ప్రెజర్ చేయట్లేదు. ఒక గ్లోబల్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్లో జాయిన్ అవ్వడము కాకపోవడం అనేది కంట్రీ ఇష్టం. ఇట్ ఈస్ అ వాలంటరీ డెసిషన్ ఆఫ్ ది గవర్నమెంట్. ఇట్ ఈస్ ద వాలంటరీ డెసిషన్ ఆఫ్ ది వాలంటరీ డెసిషన్ ఆఫ్ దట్ పీపుల్, రైట్? So joining to global institution, it is a voluntary decision. It is an voluntary decision of the nations, right? So as the countries are voluntarily joining, so there is no violation, there is no impact on sovereign existence of the individuals, sovereign existence of the nations. And coming to acceptance of conditions, it is up to the government. It is your interest. If you want to follow the conditions, follow. If not, just leave them out. So it is the the governments, it is the independent decision making of the government. So governments are free to follow these conditions. It is up to the governments. So joining of these international institutions or global institutions, or acceptance of these global conditions or the conditions imposed will not have any influence on the sovereign existence of individuals or sovereign existence of the nations, right? So membership to global institutions, will not have an impact on sovereign existence. Will not have an impact on sovereign existence. Alright, so this is one thing, this is one element. Alright, so this is about the concept of sovereignty. Am I clear about this? Am I clear about what is sovereign existence and what is sovereignty? Alright, so next we move on to the topic of, next word is socialism. Socialist, sovereign socialist, right? So if you take this, socialist, the word socialist was added to the preamble in 1976 by 42nd Amendment Act. It is by 42nd Amendment Act, where this word of socialism was added to the Constitution. And remember, it is taken from Soviet Russia. The socialism, right? The socialistic philosophy was inspired. The socialistic philosophy was inspired by Soviet Russia. It is from Soviet Russia where it is been adopted. Though this word socialism was added to preamble in 1976, but the importance, the philosophy of socialism was present right from the date of commencement of Constitution. So if you take this goal of socialism and the philosophy of socialism, The goal of socialism as well as the philosophy of socialism, it is clearly present in DPSP, that is in part 4 of the constitution. That is in part 4 of the constitution. That is the essence of socialism. The essence of socialism, the philosophy and goals of socialism, they are present in DPSP. That is both socialism and DPSP aim at promoting social democracy. They aim at promoting social democracy, social justice, promoting social democracy, social justice, and ultimately it is establishment of welfare state. Establishment of a welfare state, that means a state where there are no socio-economic inequalities. A nation where there are no socio-economic inequalities. So that is what the common goals of both socialism as well as DPSP. That means don't think that, right, the concept of welfare state came only with socialism. So concept of welfare state was present along with the commencement of constitution. That is right from the date of commencement of constitution, right, with the date of commencement of constitution, we have this goal of socialism, which is present as a part of right. So it is right, Bhagya, half an hour Agaman. Right, it is alright. So it is the goal of socialism was present even with from the date of commencement of constitution, right. So that is a commonness, alright. So if you take this socialism, right, as I said, the primary goal of socialism or socialistic state. So remember the form, though we have adopted socialism from from Soviet Russia, the Indian form of socialism is totally different from Soviet socialism. Remember this point, right? The Indian socialism, the Indian form of socialism is different from Soviet form of socialism. Soviet form of socialism, right? So we have a democratic socialism, a Gandhian socialism, whereas it is state socialism. It is state socialism purely based upon Marxian philosophy. What is the difference between state socialism and democratic socialism? In democratic socialism, we see coexistence of both individual liberty and state control. Here we see coexistence of individual liberty and state control. Coexistence of both individual liberty and state control. Here in state socialism, it is only state control. It is only state control. No place for individual liberty. No place for individual liberty. Alright? So that is the difference between Indian socialism and state socialism. Alright. So though we have adopted the concept of socialism from Soviet Russia, but there is a much difference between Indian form and what you call Soviet form. So Indian socialism is based upon Gandhian ideology, right? That is mixed economy, right? That is where we see existence of the individual liberty at the same time state control. Whereas in Soviet socialism there is no place for individual liberty. ఇక్కడనంత ఫ్రీడమ్స్ అక్కడ ఉండవు. ఇక్కడ మీరు ఏమన్నా డ్యాన్సులు వేసుకోవచ్చు, అక్కడ డ్యాన్సులు వేస్తారంటే కుదరదు. అక్కడ గవర్నమెంట్ ఏం చెప్తే అదే చేయాలి. ఇక్కడ మనకు నచ్చింది చేసుకోవచ్చు, కాకపోతే within the broader control of the state. Alright, so I'm talking about state control. So where this state control is exercised, and this is another point which is again in debate. Recently the 9-judge bench, Supreme Court has constituted a 9-judge bench to review whether the property that is within the hands of individual or the private property, can it be taken over by government or not, in the name of establishing welfare state by redistribution of wealth. Alright, so Rahul Gandhi said that, the opposition party has said that once they come into power, right, they are going to have redistribution of wealth, and to do this there will be a survey of individual property, there will be a survey and what you call redistribution. So whether this can be done or not, so whether it is constitutionally justified or not. So to deal with this issue, to bring about a concrete opinion, the Supreme Court has constituted a 9-judge bench, right? Again in that context, so this issue is important for this exam, for this year exam. Alright, so state control over where? State control over national resources. State control over national resources. So why state control is required? Because, right, if you take India, right, we see concentration of wealth within few hands. Concentration of wealth within few hands. Alright, so unless this concentration of wealth is removed, it is not possible to establish welfare state. Right, welfare state cannot be established, right, cannot be established without removing this concentration of wealth. Alright, now who should do this? Who should remove this concentration of wealth? It is state. It is the people's representative. That is, state is given the responsibility. State is given the responsibility of removing this concentration of wealth to establish welfare state. So concentration of wealth and promoting distributive justice. Alright, so distribution of wealth among the landless poor people. Right, that is the reason why state control is required. State is in a better position. State is the only institution that can take control of resources, as well as the state can redistribute this wealth among the poor people, so that there can be social justice and social democracy. Socio-economic justice, socio-economic democracy will prevail only when there is redistribution of wealth among the landless poor people. That is the reason why, right, state was given the responsibility, right? So state control over national resources and the resources which are essential for the livelihood of individuals. Right, and the reason for this state control is to redistribute these resources and promote the goal of welfare state. Right, so removal of socio-economic inequalities. State control is essential to remove socio-economic inequalities. Alright, so socialism says that all the means of production and distribution. Another important point is, right, all the means of production and distribution It says that all the means of production distribution should be under the control of state. All the means of production distribution should be under the control of state. And this is essential because in the name of welfare state. So what do you mean by means of production? What do you mean by means of production? Means of production means, what do you mean by means of production? All those institutions which are involved in production of goods and services, simply public sector units, PSUs, public sector enterprises. Public sector units or public sector enterprises. Remember, right from second 5-year plan, right, the government of India has given importance to establishment of basic and heavy industries, right? So right from second 5-year plan, importance is given to basic and heavy industries. Basic and heavy industries. Okay, that means government started setting up of these corporations, government companies, production units, and all they are established under government control. They are established by government. They are established under government control. So today all these PSUs are really under government control. Today all these public sector units are under government control. నిజంగానే ఉన్నాయా? After the liberalization, that is, we have adopted the new economic reform policy in 1991 based upon the conditions of 1990. So we have adopted the philosophy of liberalization, privatization in 1991. Okay. So after this adoption of liberalization, do you think that these public sector units are still under the control of government? Today we all talk about disinvestment, privatization, right? So now we are in the era of privatization and disinvestment. So definitely we can say that these public sector units in the present day system, in the present day contemporary period, they are not totally controlled by government. When they were established, they were under the control of government. But after 1991 and particularly with the increased pace of disinvestment, right, these PSUs, they are not under the state control. They are not under the state control, right? So that is what the fact that we should know, alright? So this is what about PSUs, and this is only half of my discussion on socialism. The remaining half, right, the remaining half of discussion, the remaining half on the socialism, I will complete tomorrow, alright? So this is only one side of the coin. In tomorrow's session, I will start with the impact of LPG, the impact of liberalization and privatization on socialism, right? So to what extent this socialism survives today? What is the relevance of socialism today, right? So for now I will start the class on this polity and I will start a discussion on answer writing, the kind of mistakes that you have done in the previous exam, alright? So what are the questions asked? Was the question paper is correct? Alright, so what I have observed is you are not understanding the demand of question, right? You are not seeing the demand of question. Alright, if we take the first question, I will give the broader outlines of this question. Explain how centralized administration was introduced into Indian administration. Explain how centralized administration was introduced into Indian administration. Right? The question is about introduction of centralized administration. Right? You should prove that. Alright, the centralized administration was introduced in India. Alright, so with what, through which act this centralized administration got introduced in India? It is by 1773 Act. The 1773 Act is the stepping stone of centralized administration. By 1833, the centralized administration has reached to its peak level. Alright? So, it is the Regulation Act of 1773 that has introduced the centralized administration and which reached to its peak stage by 1833. In what form this centralized administration is introduced? So, how to say that this centralization got introduced? So, now you should give some examples. You should give some examples to show that there is centralization in India. Give 2 or 3 examples, not more than that is required. Creation of Governor General of Bengal and his control over Bombay and Madras Presidency. Alright, this is one example. Alright, consent of Governor General for making laws on all the 3 presidencies. It is another example. Alright, next one is deprivation of legislative powers of Bombay and Madras in 1833. It is another example. Alright, creation of Governor General of India to have control and supervision over all the 3 presidencies. So these are just examples. The points that you need, the point that you know, just transform them. Just what you call, write them according to the question. You need to give 2 or 3 examples. See, remember in UPSC is not a test of information. UPSC exam is not a test of information. What is required is you should show that you have understood the question. Say for example, the question బాగా అర్థమైంది, మీ దగ్గర ఒక 300 words ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ ఉంది. 300 words ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ రాసినా, మీరు 100 words ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ రాసినా మీకు వచ్చేది 10 మార్కులే. మనకు తెలిసి మొత్తం రాయాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు. మనకు క్వశ్చన్ అర్థమైందని చెప్పడానికి 2-3 పాయింట్లు రాస్తే చాలు. It is about to show that we have understood the question. To prove this, we need to give 2 or 3 points. One good introduction, 2 to 3 core points, and one conclusion. 5 points answer. Each point 20 words. 20 into 5, 100 words. Your answer is over. Each point carries 2 marks. 5 points. 2 into 5, 10 marks. Out of 10 marks, you will get 7 marks if you write in a point wise. If you go exactly with the logic. Alright? So, use first point. The centralized administration got started from 1773 Act and it reached to its peak level by 1833. Alright? Second, right? The instances of centralized administration are A, alright, creation of Governor General. B, right, subordination of Bombay and Madras to Governor General. C, consent of Governor General for law making. D, another point. So each point of 10 words. Your answer is completed. Last, the same kind of administration that was introduced by East India Company is even followed today. That is very important because we want to prove that the same kind of system is present in Indian administration. Even today, center has more powers over the states. Alright? Say, you can take some examples. You take amending powers, you take emergency powers, you take center-state relations. Take 1 or 2 examples and say that yes, the same kind of centralized administration is followed even in present day administration. Now, who will reject your answer? Ila meer raaste mimmalni kadanade evaru? Evadana kadantada? Evadu kadanadu? This is what the answer. Discuss the institutions that were contributed by British in between 1773 to 1853. All of you wrote about all the provisions of 1773 Act, 1784 Act. Avevani kavali. Question is about not the features of these acts. Question is about, alright, institutions that were contributed between 1773 to 1853. All those institutions that got emerged in between this period. Alright, because I still remember a question that was asked in my 3rd mains exam. Alright, there was a question, the question was about contribution of British India towards financial administration of India in between 1833 to 1861. This was a question asked in public administration. Contribution of British India government, right, towards development of financial administration between 1833 to 1861. The timeline is clearly specified. So we should not go beyond 1861 or it should not be before 1833. So all the institutions that got emerged in between this period, we should write in the exam. So here if you take this 1773 to 1853, ఈ మధ్య కాలంలో వచ్చిన ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్స్ గవర్నర్ జనరల్ ఆఫ్ బెంగాల్, గవర్నర్ జనరల్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా, సుప్రీం కోర్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా, బోర్డ్ ఆఫ్ కంట్రోల్, రైట్, వైస్రాయ్, గవర్నర్ జనరల్స్, what do you call executive council, governor generals, legislative council. These are the institutions. Governor general of India was created in 1773, governor general of India was created in 1833, board of control was created in 1784, right. The governor general's executive council was created in 1773, governor general's legislative council was created in 1853. అయిపోయింది. 5 పాయింట్లు రాస్తే సరిపోతుంది, అంతకుమించి ఇంకేం అవసరం లేదు. అంటే మీరు క్వశ్చన్లో ఏం అడుగుతున్నారో దాన్ని పట్టుకోవట్లేదు. యు ఆర్ మిస్సింగ్ ద ఎగ్జాక్ట్ లైన్ ఆఫ్ క్వశ్చన్. ఎప్పుడైనా సరే 50% ఆఫ్ మార్క్స్ లైస్ ఇన్ యువర్ వాట్ యు కాల్ ఫైండింగ్ అవుట్ ది ఎగ్జాక్ట్ లైన్ ఆఫ్ క్వశ్చన్. ద మూమెంట్ యూ సీ ద క్వశ్చన్, డోంట్ థింక్ అబౌట్ ఆన్సర్, ఫస్ట్ ట్రై టు క్యాచ్ ద డిమాండ్ ఆఫ్ క్వశ్చన్. ఆల్వేస్ థింక్ అబౌట్ ద డిమాండ్ ఆఫ్ క్వశ్చన్. ఒక్కసారి మీకు ఆ క్వశ్చన్ డిమాండ్ అర్థమవుతే 2-3 పాయింట్లు రాసిన చాలు మీకు 50% మార్క్స్ పడతాయి, ర్యాంక్ వస్తుంది. ఐ స్టిల్ రిమెంబర్ మై వాట్ యు కాల్ మై ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ ఇన్ యూపీఎస్సీ. ఐ గాట్ 372 ఇన్ పబ్లిక్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్. రైట్, మీకు విషయం చెప్తా. రైట్, ఇన్ మై పబ్బార్డ్ పేపర్ 2, ఆఫ్టర్ రైటింగ్ 2 pages ఆఫ్ మై ఆన్సర్ ఐ హ్యావ్ స్ట్రైక్ డౌన్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్. 2 పేజీలు రాసిన తర్వాత మొత్తం కొట్టేసిన ఆన్సర్ని, ఫస్ట్ 2 పేజీలు ఆన్సర్ షీట్లో ఎలా ఉంటుంది ఇంప్రెషన్? చండాలంగా ఉంటుంది. నాకు అర్థమైపోయింది, నాకు మార్కులు రావులే అనుకున్నా. కానీ ఆ ఇయర్లో పేపర్ 2లో నాదే హైయెస్ట్ మార్క్ ఇండియాలో. ఎందుకంటే నాకు ఒక హ్యాబిట్ ఉంటుంది, ఆఫ్టర్ రైటింగ్ ఫస్ట్ పేజ్ ఐ రీడ్ మై ఆన్సర్ అగైన్, బికాస్ ఇన్ అ ఫ్లో వీ విల్ రైట్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్. రైట్, we are always carried out by the flow, and in that flow we will write everything that we know, but whatever we write in the answer, it should be according to question. So I started in my practice test. In my practice test, I used to read my first page of the answer, right, and check whether it is according to question or not. I have inculcated this habit. అంటే ఫస్ట్ పేజ్ రాసిన తర్వాత మళ్ళీ చదువుతా, నాకు నచ్చితే ఐ విల్ కంటిన్యూ. ఇఫ్ ఐ డోంట్ లైక్ మై ఆన్సర్, మొహమాటమే లేదు, కొట్టి పడేస్తా ఆన్సర్ని. రైట్, సో దట్ మీన్స్ ఫ్రమ్ మై ఫస్ట్ హ్యాండ్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ ఐ కెన్ సే దట్ యూపీఎస్సీ విల్ ఆల్వేస్ అప్రిషియేట్ యువర్ ఎఫర్ట్స్. మీ తప్ప మీరు తెలుసుకొని కొట్టేసి మీరు మళ్ళీ ఆన్సర్ రాసిన అనుకోండి, అది తప్పే కాదు, యూపీఎస్సీ దాన్ని ఒప్పుకుంటుంది. సెకండ్ థింగ్, ఐ షుడ్ రైట్ 40 marks. I should answer 40 marks. That is 2 20 markers are left and I have only 10 minutes of time. In last 10 minutes of time, I should answer 40 marks. It is not that easy. And I know both the answers. నాకు ఆన్సర్స్ తెలియదని కాదు, I have knowledge, I have every information, but I should write the answers. So what I have done is I have given the bullet points for every question. For the 2 questions, I have given bullet points. I took 5 minutes to write each answer. 5 నిమిషాలు ఆన్సర్ కంప్లీట్ చేయాలి, అంటే 5 నిమిషాలలో 20 మార్క్స్ని అటెంప్ట్ చేయాలి. చేసిన, ఇన్స్టెడ్ ఆఫ్ రైటింగ్ ఎంటైర్ డీటెయిల్డ్ ఆన్సర్, ఐ హ్యావ్ గివెన్ ది బుల్లెట్ పాయింట్స్. స్టిల్ ఐ గాట్ హైయెస్ట్ మార్క్ ఇన్ ఇండియా. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ మై ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ ఇన్ యూపీఎస్సీ ఆన్సర్ రైటింగ్. సో అక్కడ మనం తెలుసుకోవాల్సిన నీతి ఏంటిదంటే, వీ షుడ్ కన్వే దట్ వీ హ్యావ్ అండర్స్టూడ్ ద క్వశ్చన్ అండ్ నీడ్ నాట్ థింక్ అబౌట్ ది ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్. So 50% of information, 50% of presentation will give you the rank in UPSC. Right, 50% of information and 50% of what you call presentation. Most of you don't know one thing about me. నా గురించి చాలామంది తెలియని ఒక నిజం ఒకటి ఉంది. 2008లో రైట్, we have GS paper 1, GS paper 2, optional paper 1, optional paper 2, optional second optional, first optional, second optional, paper 1, paper 2 and essay paper. If you remove this 2 GS marks, if you remove GS marks, I am 20 marks more than 18th ranker. నాకు ర్యాంక్ రాకపోవడం కారణం ఈ జిఎస్ మార్క్స్ నాకు బాగా దెబ్బ పెట్టింది. నా జిఎస్ మార్క్స్ పక్క పెట్టేస్తే 18th ర్యాంకర్ కంటే నాకు 20 మార్క్స్ ఎక్కువ ఆ ఇయర్లో. రైట్, ఎందుకు ఆడ మార్క్స్ తగ్గినాయి అంటే ల్యాక్ ఆఫ్ బ్యాలెన్స్. నేను జిఎస్ మొత్తం వదిలేసిన ఎగ్జామ్లో. ఇట్ ఈస్ డ్యూరింగ్ మై ప్రిపరేషన్ ఇన్ మై 4th attempt. I totally left GS. I focused only on optional subjects. అందుకే నేను both the optionals I got 372, 328 in psychology. My second option was psychology, and in psychology I got 328. Alright, 125 essay. అన్ని టాప్ మార్క్సే. జిఎస్లోనే అష్టదరిద్రమైన మార్క్స్ వచ్చినాయి. రైట్, సో ఇట్ ఈస్ అ డిఫరెంట్ స్టోరీ. సో దట్ మీన్స్ whenever you see a question, always think about demand of the question and always try to catch that. And even with 50% of information, right, you can crack civils. Why people in Delhi score more marks? The reason is they keep on focusing on answer presentation. In our state, in Hyderabad, we focus more on gathering information. ఇక్కడేమో ఎంతసేపు ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ గ్యాదర్ చేయడం కోసం టైం స్పెండ్ చేస్తారు. అక్కడ వాళ్ళకున్న ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ని ఎలా ప్రజెంట్ చేయాలనో దాని మీద ఫోకస్ పెడతారు. రైట్, దట్ ఈస్ ద డిఫరెన్స్. రైట్, సో జస్ట్ ఫాలో దీస్ గైడ్ లైన్స్ బిఫోర్ ఆన్సర్ రైటింగ్. రైట్, సో ఐఎమ్ గివింగ్ నంబర్ ఆఫ్ క్వశ్చన్స్. ఎనఫ్ క్వశ్చన్స్ ఆర్ దేర్ విత్ యూ. స్టార్ట్ ప్రాక్టీసింగ్ ఇట్. ప్రతి పాయింట్ని టెస్ట్ చేసుకోండి. రైట్, హ్యాండ్ రైటింగ్ని టెస్ట్ చేసుకోండి, టైం మేనేజ్మెంట్ని టెస్ట్ చేసుకోండి, వర్డ్ లిమిట్ని టెస్ట్ చేసుకోండి, ప్రతి దాన్ని టెస్ట్ చేసుకోండి. అన్ని కనుక మీరు ప్రతి పారామీటర్ మీ కంట్రోల్లో ఉంటే నేను చెప్తున్నా కదా, టాప్ 100లో ర్యాంక్ ఉంటుంది. రైట్, మై రూమ్మేట్స్ ఆర్ 18th ర్యాంక్, 62nd ర్యాంక్, 328 ర్యాంక్ రాంది ఒక్కరికి. అండ్ ఐఎమ్ ద వన్ టు క్లియర్ ఫిలిమ్స్ రైట్ బిఫోర్ దెమ్. అందరికన్నా ముందు క్వాలిఫై అయింది నేనే ఫిలిమ్స్. రైట్, సో దీస్ ఆర్ ద థింగ్స్ దట్ యూ షుడ్ ఫాలో ఫర్ వాట్ యు కాల్ ఆన్సర్ రైటింగ్. Alright, so for today's of the class here, we'll meet in tomorrow's session same at 9:30 in the morning. Okay. Every day. Definitely I will take a session on this. Because already we know the answer for that question, but we didn't know how to decode the question. Okay. We know all the instructions of what are the. So what we'll do is we'll at least discuss one question and one question. The question is given in the class. Elections again.